Hello everyone and welcome to altPOV.radio. Tonight our guest is Jon Sumple, who is the director and co-producer of Extraordinary, the Stan Romanek story, the documentary that is now available on altPOV.tv. The purpose of the show tonight, I talked to Jon about this a little bit, and we thought it would be a good idea to have Jon come on and actually for us to talk about some of the things that happened to us while on this 5-year journey of making this documentary. And this stuff isn't in the documentary. We just didn't have the space for it, but we thought it would be a good idea to share it with the audience tonight, and because they are some pretty amazing stories. So Jon, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. It's a little weird. Jon and I know each other very well, so but this is going to be great. We're Jon, you know, I think it's important in a way to we've wanted to share these stories for a long time. Now, we've been on some shows, radio shows, and we have shared them, but I think this is good for you and I to just kind of converse and kind of talk about the journey. So why don't you, we'll just start with the beginning of the journey and kind of how we were told at the beginning that strange things might happen.
Sure. I think, yeah, it's just the whole how it all started. I think it's just go back a little bit further than that, is that you and I, Jack and I, had worked together on a couple of projects in the past, video-related projects back in the late 90s in the paranormal realm, and did a lot of production work in the field in New Orleans, and then we also did some post-production work in Orlando and put together a trailer for a film. So we've worked together in that capacity before. And that was late 90s, and then about a decade later, we kind of both started talking again about, well, how can we do something like that again and actually turn it into something? So the whole journey of, you know, you had the idea to hey, let's go on a road trip to New Mexico. And, you know, rent an RV for 2 weeks, and we were going down that path. We were doing research, we were looking at the different places we can go to, the routes that we could take, you know, getting the gear that we would need. So we were kind of getting excited about this, and this was in probably started talking about February, March of 2009 was when we were first having those discussions, and looking to do it in the spring, summer of 2009. Then you went to an event in Colorado, a Stephen Greer event, and was there for the weekend, had a chance to meet Alejandro and Chuck Zukowski, and that kind of turned you on to the whole Stan story. And that's when it kind of all, you gave me a call, and I'll never forget it, because when you called me, you were like hyperventilating, and I just saw the most amazing photograph.
Well, I don't know about hyperventilating, but yeah, no, I was. I had just seen the photograph and of the little girl, and I just had it. I knew, you know, I think from my perspective, there were a lot of stories we could have told, and they would have been good. And I still want to do the New Mexico one. I think that'd be interesting. Yeah, but you know, when something so profound, the evidence I saw was so profound, and it was there was so much there that we could show visually, and it was the story made sense from a chronological standpoint as well. And I just, to me, it was like, if we're going to tell a story in this genre, this is the story we need to tell. And I knew that, you know, I knew you wouldn't be quite as excited because obviously you hadn't seen anything yet. Mm-hmm. But after that, we'll talk people through this. So after that, basically after that phone call, you kind of did your due diligence, right? You started doing some research.
Well, the first thing I had to do is I didn't know anything about Stan at all. I mean, the only thing, when I started to do some research and learn a little bit about him, I found out that, oh, he's that guy that was on the Larry King show several years back, who I felt bad for because he was just eviscerated by the debunkers that were on the show, and Larry King was lobbing those guys softballs and basically, you know, having Peckman and Stan look like fools, which was unfortunate because, you know, the only thing that they were moving forward with was a photo at that time. It wasn't even the video. It was just a photo of the head in the window. Right. So I had that recollection trigger connection once I started doing some research on Stan. So the very first thing I had to do was read his book. And after I finished reading his book, I was very intrigued by if he has all the evidence that this book says that he does, especially the equations were pretty amazing. So it was the equations that were very intriguing, and then all the documented evidence of the things that had happened to him in the different events, and reading them through the book. It's like, wow, if he has the documentation, this could be good visual storytelling. So it was reading the book and then seeing some of the things that he had on the internet, some of the presentations. Didn't go too much into that because I didn't want it to kind of taint the storytelling that we eventually would want to do. But then I started doing, for my own edification in this area, is that I'm not a ufology buff. I'm not a researcher. I'm not a ufologist. I am interested in UFOs from the sense of the curiosity of what else is out there. I was fortunate enough younger to see UFO 3 different times between the ages of probably like 8 and 13. 3 different occasions that I had seen them. Twice they were seen by a lot of people, even reported, I think, over 200 plus phone calls into the local police department one night.
This was in Connecticut?
This was in Connecticut, when I was growing up in Connecticut, excuse me. And another one with a friend sitting on my front porch. It was just before Halloween. We saw a saucer-shaped craft with green, white, and red lights vertically drop into the forest out in front of my house. And we both saw it, plain as day. It wasn't like it was some dot off in the distance. It was probably only a half a mile away and enough to see some detail. So it was just kind of one of those things where we looked at each other, kind of like, did you just see what I saw? And he's like, yeah, I did. And we ran to see if we had some friends down the street to see if they had seen him. So my eyes were open to it. It wasn't something that I was like, I don't want to do a UFO story. So to me, it was about the storytelling. It had to be a compelling enough story versus a one-off thing to want to go down that road. So what I had read in the book was intriguing. So I wanted to do more research into some of the things that were discussed, and I started looking at timelines and Majestic 12 and some of the programs that were started back in the 50s, and I just did a huge deep dive. Spent 2 or 3 days where all I did for 15, 20 hours was research. And it really opened my eyes to something that I never realized there was that much information out there. So I was intrigued that there's plenty of information and therefore an audience that would be interested in this type of content. Another thing that I recognized too during all of this research is that there was so much, I would say, storytelling that was from the perspective of an interviewer asking an experiencer what they saw. So the focus was all on the craft or whatever, or the telling of their experience, but there was very little storytelling around how it had affected them as a human being. What were the emotional and psychological impact for the individual and the people around them? So I didn't see that much of it, and I thought that would be the most compelling way to tell the story. And I know when we were first talking about what would be, once we got through that, so this was over the course of the summer of 2009, and then we moved into the fall when we actually reached out to try to make a connection with Stan. And I think the big thing with that was his reluctance initially to talk to us. And it's like, why are you different from anybody else who's, come knocking at my door who's interested in my story? And I think and we had some debates early on too about what's the best way to tell the story. I know that you were very intrigued by the whole hybrid children element of it, and that was, and I agreed with that. But I think my resistance to that was I didn't want to start with something that most people might not get to out of the gate. And my approach with this really from the beginning, and we all got on board after several discussions about it, was let's make a film that is accessible to the masses.
Right.
So after many phone calls, even before we had a conversation with Stan, was let's not focus on something that's been done before. Let's focus on the human element. Let's tell the whole story and make sure that people clearly understand the impact from a humanistic perspective. So once we were all together on the same page with that, it was, the conversations with Stan, which were, the initial ones were kind of tough because it was like pulling teeth. He was very protective.
He wasn't. He had been burned a couple times, and he was very concerned about the way he would be made to look. He had to get to know us and trust us. And from our standpoint, and let John clarify this for people, because you and I, we know we've gotten a lot of emails and texts and messages from people who there's a little confusion. You know, we went into this from the very beginning as filmmakers. We weren't part of a bandwagon. We weren't part of a UFO group. We weren't part of a fan club. You know, we went into this as, look, we're filmmakers. We're going to tell a compelling story, and that is it. I mean, and I think that sometimes people think that we are in Stan's camp. We're part of a certain group, and can you just clarify that, because I think that's really important.
It's been a challenge, actually, I think, over the course of the last 5 years, and one of the things that we wanted to make it very clear is that we didn't do a propaganda film, you know, for Stan. Once we did our research, once we had conversations internally, once we had the opportunity to talk with Stan and sit down and see some of them, that's when we made the decision that this was something worth exploring. And it was a worthwhile story. So we had to do our due diligence on whether or not, you know, in all honesty, one of the things that we had to figure out from the very beginning was, is this guy nuts? Is this story true? If we put ourselves out there, are we going to, in any way, shape, or form, have our credibility dashed by something that is not true? So we were just as much vetting him out as he was vetting us out. And so people need to understand that process in the beginning wasn't lovey-dovey at all. It was business. And really, Stan was protecting his story and protecting, you know, the perception of him out in the real world. And we were making sure that we were getting a story that was not going to come back to bite us in the butt, you know, down the road. You know, we're putting our names on it. So from filmmaker, storyteller point of view, we wanted to make a really good story about a pretty fascinating subject, based on what we were exposed to. So, you know, we were an independent company, not associated with Stan, had to go through negotiations for the rights to his story. You know, there's a business side of it and there's a creative side of it. And the business side was the very first step, and that took a long time. It took 1.5 years to get to the point where we were ready to go. So people need to understand that, you know, we were not in Stan's camp to promote any agenda that he has. And then there were some contentious discussions early on that, you know, once we got through them and we were all in agreement about, you know, what we wanted to do, how we wanted to do it, when we wanted to do it, and the storytelling that we wanted to do, then we were okay. But the challenge has been, over the course of the last 3 years in particular, is that we have our website, J3 Films website, and as we're promoting it, people are, you know, asking us questions about how's Stan doing, and can, it ask us questions as if we were Stan. It's like, folks, we're a film company. We're not
exactly. And they'd also ask questions to Stan as if he were the filmmaker. They would ask questions like, you know, Stan, how's your movie? And Stan, he didn't have an agenda here, but he was just like, oh, it's this, it's that, because it really was very excited about finally, once he trusted us, he was very excited about having the story told the way we were going to do in such an objective way, to just leave it out there for people. And, you know, for him, I don't think he even thought about it, but he would be like, oh, it's coming great. And I remember, you know, you and I having discussions with Stan and Lisa, you know, it's like, look, you know, people have to understand we're the filmmakers. It's not his film. He's the subject of a film. And we, you know, we don't say this in a malicious way at all. It's just that people need to understand that this is the way we approach this is from a very professional way in which a filmmaker would approach doing any film. And any controversial figure, whether it's Hitler, Ted Bundy, a UFO abductee, same thing.
Yeah, and I think people were putting him and Lisa on the spot, assuming that it was their responsibility for letting their friends and network know what was going on. When we eventually got to the point where, like, Stan, whenever anybody asks you a question, just point them to us. It's not your responsibility at all to tell them what we're doing. That's our responsibility.
Right.
So, you know, one of the things that people need to understand is that we are storytellers first and foremost. You and I both have writing backgrounds, and I've done a lot of video production over the last 20, 25 years, but nothing in a long-form documentary format. So this was a first foray for us. We all have day jobs. This wasn't this is not what we're doing full time. Part of the pre-production process that people need to understand too, and this is one of the things that's hard, I think, for folks who are out there. Is like, well, why isn't this film done yet? Well, why isn't it? Why is it taking so long? Well, part of the reason why it's taking so long is because you need money to make a film. And you go through pre-production, and in the pre-production process, you're working on figures and numbers. And our budget changed like 5 times. Our initial budget was probably 4 times what it wound up being. Right. And we eventually kept ratcheting it back. And the main reason why we ratcheted it back was because we wanted to get it made. We couldn't find the funding that we needed to do it at the budget that would have been desirable. And when I say desirable, it would have included paying people who were making the film, which nobody has made a penny, as far as that's concerned. So this has been, I don't want to say it's been a labor of love, because that would make it sound like it was a passion project. This was a job. This was work for us. Right. And it was a fascinating enough story that we were willing to forego any sort of income as a result of that, because we felt it was worth it. So when people ask the question about, why are you charging for the film and things of that nature, the response is simple: is we have a significant amount of debt that needs to be paid back in order to make it a worthwhile journey for us. And that doesn't include us getting anything. It's about paying back everything it took to get to this point. First and foremost is the most important thing. Right. So we have approached it as a business, and we, hopefully people will understand that. We didn't approach it as, oh, we're going to crank out, UFO themed films, once a quarter, for really low production values, real low expense. We wanted to create the most professional, high quality film that we could on a very minimal budget. And I think one of the things that people also need to know is that we've attracted people just like us who saw the value of this story as something that could help reach a wide audience. Therefore, they stepped in. So we have our I don't even call him assistant editor, because he's been kind of like an editor. He and I have worked close together. Patrick has been phenomenal, and the hours that he's put in are just crazy. And the same with Anton. Anton is a classically trained musician who would probably been paid 5-10 times more than he was that we paid him, which was pocket change. Right. But he did it because he thought it was a great story. So we attracted those type of people because of our passion for the story. I think was a big part of it.
Right, and you hear those stories a lot with filmmakers, and making, whether it's just independent films or documentaries, that it really is a question of the passion of the director and the producers. It kind of boils over on, and then all of a sudden they have their editor, they have their sound guy, they have their cameraman, because the people believe in it. And it's true passion, it's sincere passion. One of the things we're going to do, just to remind everyone, we asked you to send questions, and you did. You sent a lot of questions, so we're going to get to some of those in a little bit. But first we want to talk about some of the things that have happened to us, that have very profound things that have changed our lives from a personal standpoint since getting involved in this. And I think the way to preface this would be to say that when we did get involved, we were on a phone call with Stan, and I remember him saying, "Are you ready for this?" Once he had decided that we were the people that should make this, and that he felt comfortable with that, and we were comfortable with it, he asked us that, and our response was, "Well, of course we're ready. Are you ready? You're the one. This is you're going to be on camera." Blah blah blah. He goes, "No, you don't understand. Are you ready for what might happen to you if you start making this documentary?" And it hit us, I think, John, for the first time. It's like, oh. Okay, what's going to happen to us? And so let's walk people through. I think it really started with some phone calls. So why don't we tell people a little bit about that?
Well, one thing we should clarify too is that J3 Films assumed the contract for Stan's project from a production company that you and I were both involved with initially. So a year and a half we worked on it. With that other production company, there was a decision made that they wanted to step out, so we took it over from there. So, in the very beginning, the first phone call came into the producer that we were working with before, and basically saying that this is an important project for you guys to work on. And when he called us up to play back the recording of the Audrey call that he got, it was one of those, wow, hair standing up. I remember recording his recording of it on my phone and calling my wife Karen over to listen to this, and we were both like eyes bugging out of our head and hair standing up on your arm and back of your neck, because you're like, wow, that's nuts.
It's a strange feeling, and I remember what happened was, and because this was the first time I had experienced this. I was the producer we're talking about, who's a good friend of mine. He lives in Maryland, so he was calling from Maryland. I was in Santa Fe at the time, Santa Fe, New Mexico, alone in a house on top of a mountain. It's a very secluded place, might I add. And then Stan was on. We were on a conference call with Stan, who was in Colorado, Loveland, Colorado, and we had heard about phone calls that people would get, and they were interesting. There were several types, but they called them Audrey phone calls because basically Audrey was the actual program. It was a voice manipulation program used to disguise voice. So it was actually a very polite sounding, proper lady who spoke electronically, and that people would get messages, but they had meaning behind them. So anyway, what happened was we had never experienced this, and we were on a call. We were on the call. It was a conference call. We had been on the phone with Stan for a while, and then what happened was we started to get a lot of interference on the phone call, and you'd hear static, that kind of sound, and then we got disconnected. And I remember we all had to call each other back, and we're like, okay,
and I wasn't.
You weren't on the first one, right? This and I remember calling you, and what happened was we got back on the phone and we started to talk again, and then you heard the static, and then you actually heard a female voice come on, and it actually interrupted Stan in mid-sentence because he was talking about something, and she's like, hello, can you hear us? That's exactly what she said. Hello, can you hear us? Static, and then we got disconnected again. So now at this point, I know what's happening, right? Because we had at least heard some of these phone calls because they had been recorded in the past as part of his case. So we called back. We all got on the phone together. We were like, okay, let's just get back on the phone. Let's talk and see what happens. We started to discuss some things, and one of the questions that the other producer asked Stan was, Stan, what do you want to get out of this? What is the thing that you want the most out of doing this? And Stan said, I want to know why me? Why me? And at the time, it was very important to him. It's like, why they pick me? And we started to talk for a little longer, and then all of a sudden, the static came back. And then the voice came on again. It's like, hello, can you hear us? We are sorry that we disconnected you, but it's very difficult to communicate from such long distances. So that's exactly what this voice said. And then said, but we want you to know that you should continue to do what you're doing, because, in not so many words, but basically to continue to do what we're going to do. And then says, and also you are correct, because what had happened was Patrick responded to Stan when he said, why me? And Patrick had said, well, I think it's because it's like you're the Rosetta Stone. You're like you're the middleman. You're translating this message. You're a messenger. And so the voice said at the end, she had said, and you are correct. You are the Rosetta Stone. And then we got disconnected again. And then that's when Patrick, I think they called him back, or how did that? I can't remember exactly how that went down at that point.
I remember Patrick. I think you were on the line too. Called. I think the three of us were on the call at that time, and shared the recording. We played it back a couple of times, and it was like, wow, that was it was mind blowing, actually. The fact that it was like, here we are. And I think one of the things that I don't know if it was on that call or the second one, might even have been another one, where Stan was like, I think it was the second call that we had, where Stan was like, if Audrey says you guys are the right people, that's good enough, for me. And I think it was on the second call where one of the Audrey messages was basically that, you are the people that are supposed to be, making this film. It's very important to get it out there as fast, as quickly as you can. Again, this was 5 years ago. And what was the comment about it will, how you say, hit the ground running type of thing? Yep. So that was a very clear message, and that you guys need to do this and do it quickly. Little did we know, I mean, at that point we were still in the business side of the relationship.
Right.
Come to the agreement and everything. So, but I think the second call was one where you were not available. You were indisposed because of a commitment that you were in and didn't have your phone with you as a result of it. And I was on a conference call with, actually at the time, the third J, Jamie, who in a completely unrelated capacity, and with two other people. So Jamie had brokered this call with another woman who had written a script for a film with a producer out in L.A. We were trying to kind of pitch her film, script idea to this guy. So as we're on the phone talking to him, I'm on my landline, and my cell phone gets a call saying that it's from my landline phone. And I'm on my landline phone. I'm like, okay, this is a little strange. So I wasn't thinking Audrey at all at this point. So I answered the phone. I wasn't participating in the call. I was listening. So I muted that, answered the phone, nothing there, just nothing. So I hung up. 5 minutes later, phone rings again. Same thing, shows my home phone calling, and I'm on my home phone. This time I stepped aside and answered the phone again and said, hello. And this time I heard 3 clicks. And I thought it was going to start after the 3 clicks. I was going to hear the operator come on and say, "Please hang up your phone and dial again," type of thing. But after the 3 clicks, the phone started ringing, as if I had called somebody, and I didn't call anybody. And a couple rings later, there's a voice on the other end, "Hello," and it's Stan, his standard hello greeting. And I was like, "Hello, who is this?" And he said, "This is Stan." And I said, "Hey, Stan, this is John. Did you call? What are you calling about?" And he said, "I didn't call you. You called me." I'm like, "No, I didn't call you." And then Patrick was brought into the same phone call. And there was another woman that we were consulting with at that time who was brought in. So all of a sudden there's 4 of us on this call at the same time. We were all brought together through this home phone calling your cell phone type of thing. And the woman we were on the phone, she was having some issues with her cable. She had a cable telephone service, so she had a cable modem box and phone service. I was using my cell phone. Stan was on his landline phone, and I believe Patrick was on his cell phone. So we had all these different technologies converging, through this bringing us together. So it wasn't all done landline. It was done through a variety of different modalities to connect with. So while we're all together on the call, we started talking. We were on for almost an hour, but there was 3 or 4 times we were interrupted during that call. And the first 2 were the hello, can you hear us? And then nothing. It was like, okay, something's going on here. And I remember this was the first time I'm hearing that electronic voice, and again, hair standing up, just kind of, this is nuts, this is crazy. And came on a second time about 20 minutes later. "Hello, can you hear us? Sorry for the difficulty." Same thing, type of communicating and sharing the message of that it is important to move forward with this film. How you say, hit the ground running to get it out there as quickly as you can. And then just kind of like, wow, this is so, it broke in for the 3rd time with that message, and I have it recorded somewhere. And then towards the end of the call, it came back on again. The voice came on again, and it specifically said, "Sorry, Jack couldn't be on the call with us today, but please let him know that we look forward to his involvement with this project." And I remember talking with you about that afterwards. You're like, "Are you kidding me? I wasn't on it, and it called me out." And so that was like the very beginning of the ball really starting to accelerate for us.
And you're a critical thinker. You're an objective person. I've known you for a long time. When these things happen, we get on the phone afterwards and we start to talk about, how is that possible? What could it have been? Right? I mean, I think it's important for people to understand that we did go through the usual kind of let's evaluate, let's think about what this could have been. Could it have been Stan? Could it have been someone else? Could it have been someone down the street playing a hoax? Could it have been? And tell people a little bit about the process. We did look into it a little bit as far as the capabilities that would be the capability of someone who could do something like this, and what it would take.
I had a relative that worked in the telecommunications industry for the phone company in New England for, I think, 30 years, and called him up and asked, I never told him what it was about. I didn't talk anything about the UFOs and didn't talk about Stan. I just talked about the capability of this type of, intercepting a call, one, two, bringing multiple people together on a call. I wanted to understand, how that all worked. So we had done research, and we saw that there's things on the internet that you could get that you could do to kind of create messages that are left for people. But this was different because it's talking to you in the middle of a phone call. It's not like something that was set up ahead of time. It was an engaging process, for us, especially some of the later ones that we had. But as I walked him through this process, and I said, so here was my biggest head scratcher in this, is that you've got a landline phone, you've got a cell phone, you've got a second landline phone, and a cable phone call being made. And he said, well, that's the one that makes it really hard. He said, if all of the people were together on a telephone call, he said that can be done through the telephone company. And he said it could be done by somebody who knows how to do it. It could be done at higher levels within a phone company. And he said it also could be done if the government interceded and said, please do this. So he says it's not like the government's going to step in and do this on their own. They would have to get involved with the phone companies in order to do that. So I kind of, I asked a lot more questions to help qualify that this was an anomaly as opposed to something that any joker on the street could have pulled off. And he said the only way that somebody could have pulled that off, and pulling all of those together, is they would have had to know, had high-level access within the phone company, or had high-level access within the military. The military stepped in and said, or the government, not the military, the government stepping in and saying, you need to execute this. So, and he said, so at the end of the call, he said, so what's this all about? Why are you asking me about this? And I told him about it. And when I told him about the calls and the voices coming on, because I never mentioned anything about that, he was just like, that's rather interesting. And I said, I didn't want to tell you about this because I didn't want you to think that I was, a nut. If I told you this up front, you probably wouldn't have spent the time with me that you did. And he said, no. He said, I think it's quite interesting. He said, I don't think it's something that a regular citizen would be able to accomplish pulling together. He says, I don't know if there are ETs out there, I think is what he said, that could do that. He said, but he goes, I can tell you right now that it would be highly unlikely that a citizen, an everyday citizen, could have pulled all of these phone calls together at the same time. So we did some due diligence on things like that. And you mentioned earlier about the whole idea of really the Occam's razor, the most likely explanation thing. And when you and I did the paranormal concept, TV concept back in the day, we did a lot of research in New Orleans. We've been on numerous field investigations in the paranormal realm, and that's one of the things that you do. So you have people who are engaged with those that are actively involved in the emotion of the moment, but then you have peripheral people whose sole responsibility is to try to prove what's happening as being whether it's a breeze coming from a window, whether there's a draft coming through a vent, what's the cause of that? So, our experience in that realm made it very primary for us to go through the same process with everything that we experienced as it pertained to Stan. So I spent a lot of time initially, and I don't want to say that I didn't believe him, but I didn't want to just go in hook, line, and sinker without trying to figure out if there was a way for him to be doing this or somebody else to be doing it to him to make it look like it was some outside entity that was coordinating all of this. So we did our due diligence, and we did I think spend quite a bit of time trying to find out what it could have been, and we really didn't find anything that was obvious to us.
Right, and I think it's important to mention as well that a couple of other things. One is that on one occasion, and we don't want to go necessarily for the purposes of this podcast, go into some of the things that are in the film, but some of these things are. And one of the things that did happen was that there were people that came over talking about paranormal investigations. They did there was a lot of paranormal activity in Stan's house, Stan and Lisa's home, and this group in Colorado came to the house and did an investigation. And they set up EVP, electronic voice phenomena. So they had voice recorders just in the house. And during this particular investigation, an Audrey call or Audrey voice came on as an EVP. So there was no phone call. Had nothing to do with the telephone. And this, all of a sudden, this voice was on the tape, and it was
captured at a very slow speed.
It was at a slow. They had to speed it up, right? So it was at a different frequency of or whatever it was, but had nothing to do with the phones. And something else that's important to mention too is that sometimes Stan was on the call, sometimes Stan wasn't on the call, and then there was a time where our friend Lori, where she had just gotten involved with us because she was helping us set something up in California, in Los Angeles. And I always thought that was a really fascinating. If you could just talk to people about that real quick, some of our listeners, that was a very interesting phone call.
Yeah, it was interesting because we hadn't met her yet. We met her as a result of Stan was having a speaking event that we were going to be filming. His presentation at an event out in LA. He was sick, and he got an Audrey call, and the Audrey call told him, "Do not go." And I think the message at that time was that there was a danger element to it, that he shouldn't go. So here we are, all ready to go. It's like a week before, and he's told to reschedule. And he wasn't feeling well, so I think we wound up pushing it back a couple of weeks. So the phone call was, how do we find a different location? Because the location that was going to be at wasn't going to be available in a couple of weeks, and Lori got involved as a result of that. And if I recall, the phone call, she was on her way home and got a phone call while she was in the car with her daughter, and it freaked her out because it was a direct phone call to her. Telling her that Stan needs, as you look for this new venue, I think it was Stan needs security. We are concerned about, Stan being in this area. So she's all, freaked out. And I think that she was driving. She said she couldn't talk right now, that she was going to be home in a few minutes, if I recall. And then when she got home, she got another phone call. And then she called us. We all got on the call. And while we were on the call with her, Audrey came on again and reiterated that whole idea that, when you're searching for a location, make sure there is plenty of, I think, space around it. There is protection for Stan. So it became this big concern, I think, for everybody. Is there a danger element, for this?
Right. And then what happened? We were on the phone, and then Lori's like, I can't, LA is a very busy town. It's going to be really hard for me to find a place. And then someone suggested, well, just put it out there. Kind of, not as a joke, but we were just, what, with all the strange stuff that's going on, just put it out there to Audrey or whoever's listening to us, because obviously we're being monitored. Put it out there to ask for help, right? So she said, well, I really could use the help with trying to find a place. And then like we continued to talk for like 10 minutes, and then boom, 10 minutes later, out of nowhere,
mm-hmm.
Right? And what did the voice say? Comes right on the line.
I don't remember.
We will help. We will.
It was a confirmation.
It was a confirmation of, we will help you with that.
And I remember Lori at that point almost passed out.
Yeah, she did. I mean, I think that, and that's hard for our viewers and listeners sometimes, and a lot of them are experiencers, and most people we've learned do have some kinds of paranormal experiences in their lives, but it's very hard to convey to other people the feeling that you have when you're experiencing one of these things. And there are the tangible parts of it. Obviously, it's a phone call, it's a voice, it's this, it's that. But then there's another part of it that is intuitive. And I think that you and I, we've talked about this a lot, where you just know. You know that it's not normal. You know that there's something special going on. You know that this is something that is beyond anything you've ever experienced before in your life. And again, it's an intuitive feeling, and you can't prove that, but it's important because these are the human experiences that we're having. And I think that as we talk about these phone calls, I would say, Jon, over the course of the 5 years that we've been involved in this project, around how many phone calls would you say that we have gotten? Not Stan and Lisa, but you and I and any of the other producers involved in this.
I would say probably between 5 and 7 calls. You and I have had 2 directly just with us. So there was a part of it with me, and so you and I had 2. I had 1 directly at me. We had 2 group calls, and then the one with Lori. So that's, I think, 6 different ones. Excuse me, I have a cold. I just started up today, okay. So a little stuffy. One of the challenges that I had in the beginning, again, there was that this was still all part of the trust building, was that it seemed like every single time that we had one of these calls, Stan was on the phone. So there was a part of me, there was a voice in the back of my head saying, it could be him. It could be him. He could be the one doing this. Until you and I got the 2 phone calls on one Saturday morning that Stan was not on the call. I was driving to a video shoot actually that day with my production partner in a whole different project, and I saw my cell phone was showing that my home phone was calling me. And I knew my wife wasn't at home, so I was pretty sure that we were just about to get an Audrey call. So when I answered the phone, you were on it. So we kind of talked for a little bit, and we're like, okay, something's up. We'll wait. We asked, nothing came through, hung up, and then 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, got a call back, and Audrey came on and talked to both. We both were connected the second time. And Audrey came on and said, we do not mean to alarm you. This is nothing to be concerned about, but we just thought you should know that you're being observed. So you're kind of like, okay, what are we supposed to do with that? So right. He didn't say who. Are we being observed by government, black ops, something in the unknown government, the kind of shadow government? Are we being watched above? It's just one of those things, it was very clear is that, you have nothing to be alarmed about.
Right.
But we just thought you should know that you're being watched, you're being observed.
Right. And we had just signed the contract.
Yeah.
We had just signed the contract officially to make the film. And then we got this phone call, and I was on a soccer field ready to coach my son. I mean, this is that's the irony of it, just this duplicitous kind of, oh my gosh. I had to coach a soccer game after. I remember telling you, how do I do this?
After that, you were like, I don't know if I can get out of the car.
I mean, it was so strange, and it's just absolutely, it blows your mind more than just a little bit. Phone calls were, and also just to mention too with the phone calls, and these some of these calls are in the film, but eventually Stan and Lisa started to get, and some other people started to get phone calls from little kids, little girls. So it wasn't just Audrey. It wasn't just this electronic voice. There were little girls on phone calls saying the same kinds of things. Sorry, we disconnected you, but it's really difficult to communicate from such long distances. In one, there was a fascinating phone call where this little girl shushed a bunch of other kids who were playing around her. So she goes, "Shush, quiet, I can't hear," or something like that, as if they were all in a room I mean, it was the strangest thing, and it was all part of the progression of this case, where all of a sudden now these little kids are appearing, and these phone calls I feel were even more fascinating than the Audrey calls in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
how did you feel about the children calls?
Yeah,
those
calls for me, based on not the ones that we experienced, I felt like they were guiding, helping ones. And some of we've listened to all the different ones that Stan and Lisa have had, and some of them are a little bit different. So some appear to be government or helping, guiding, government in a good sense. Some of them appear to be misdirection and misinformation, and other ones appear to be based on the messages and the tone from somewhere else. But when you hear the ones with the children, especially in the context of what they're sharing, it's that's one of those things too that the hoaxers would love to sit there and say that everything about his case Stan has done, and it's one of those things there. It's hard for people to understand. I can see how somebody could, sitting from afar, could say, I'm just going to look at this with no objectivity whatsoever. Just my mindset is that this is all not true, and therefore I'm going to shoot holes in it. My recommendation for those people would be spend a week with Stan and Lisa. Not to say that Stan and Lisa are going to invite you over to their house, but after you spend a week with them and get to see them in their element, in their day-to-day, you will see that they are, one, that they don't have the means to pull off the things that, the technical side of it. One means financially, means intellectually, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. There's a certain amount of knowledge that you would need to have in order to do some of the things that people claim that they can do, or they did. That's just not who they are. And if you spend a little bit of time with them, you'll see that very quickly, that there is no desire to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. And Lisa made it very clear when we interviewed her that if she felt for any second that Stan was lying about anything, she would leave. She's been tested, throughout the years on things that she, challenged him on, but was either later validated by or at least reached the conclusion that it's unexplainable. Stan's not doing it. So, knowing that we were able to define that relationship or develop that relationship with Lisa separate from Stan, and had a lot of feedback and input from her, numerous phone calls just with her, to have a very clear understanding about the emotional and human side. I think it helped add a lot of context to the storytelling that we eventually, in the direction we eventually took when we did the interviews. So we captured the emotional side. So the children part is it is an emotional element in the film. And I think that that was one of the challenges, and one of my desires in the very beginning was to tell an emotional story. I wanted to go back. You had mentioned the paranormal side of this a little bit, and so people are like, well, what's happened to you, with your experiences, with them? And the very first time that we went there, so we spent the summer doing our research, the fall engaged with Stan in numerous phone calls, trying to win over, his trust and belief that we were going to serve, his story in a very honest way. So it was December 8th, I think, was when we finally got to the point where we went to their house. So me, you, and Patrick flew there. We spent, I think it was 2 or 3 nights there. And the very first night that we were there, walked through the door, were welcomed with open arms. We're kind of surprised by how nice these people are. They're not like a bunch of crazies or loonies or, wearing tinfoil hats and, missing teeth. They're just normal people that are very welcoming, and they welcomed us into their house. But I do remember, couldn't have been there for more than an hour or two, that, Stan was telling us that, whenever there's a lot of people around, things happen. And I think somebody mentioned something about, they thought they saw something downstairs earlier on, and I was like, oh, well, when you said you saw something, you said, oh, it just seemed like there were some lights or something down there. I don't remember the full context of it, but I do remember going down the stairs, and as I was walking down the stairs, and I was staying in a room down in the basement, and when I went down the stairs, as I was walking down the stairs, I saw a flash of light. I'm about to sneeze.
Bless you.
I saw a flash of light, and it wasn't like a strobe light or off in another room. It was like a red light about 15 feet in front of me, 10, 15 feet in front of me. And it was like a pop. So it just like burst of red light. And I remember stopping on the stairs and just kind of going like, what was that? Not really thinking that much of it. And then Stan told me later that he had heard some stuff down there, and he went and took some pictures. And one of the pictures is in the film. And there's a shadow right in front of the door of the room that I was sleeping in that night. So I'm like, oh, that's fantastic. This is great. You took a picture of a shadow right in front of the room that I will be spending the next 2 nights in. So that was my first experience with something that I would say was a paranormal event, at their house. So it was the very first day that we were there. Within a couple of hours of being there, having that first experience was pretty amazing. And then we had been there. We were there that weekend. We were there another weekend to do research later in the spring of 2010. And we were there for, I think, 8 or 9 days. And while we were there, a couple times, faucets turned on,
right.
Hearing noises. Stan is just waiting for things to happen constantly. I think part of him wants those things to happen so that people can experience it with him, because it validates that, I'm not just nuts hearing these things or seeing these things, or the big ththing that we saw on 2 different occasions was the water turn on.
Right.
So one time we were down in their family room, a split-level house. The kitchen is visible through, it's raised up a little bit. And all of a sudden, no one's in the kitchen, completely empty. Lights are on up in the kitchen and dining area. And all of a sudden, the water in the kitchen is on full blast. So my first thing is to go up, take a look at it. And if you had one of those pressure handles where you can kind of push it up and the water comes on by moving it up or down, potentially pressure could do that. But these were turn handles. And the only way a turn handle goes from off to full blast is if somebody turns the handle. And there was nobody there to turn the handle in the kitchen. And then the other time we were up in their bedroom working on, there was another computer up in that room. We were huddled around the bedroom computer, and the bathroom, same thing happens. Again, turn handle. It didn't go on. It didn't start trickling. It went from completely off to full blast.
Right.
And Stan and Lisa are acting like, oh, it's no big deal. This happens all the time. And you and I are like, okay, this is unusual.
Right.
But it's not unusual for us. So for us, it was one of those things where we're like, okay, there's a paranormal element to this too. And one of the things that people ask, and you're probably better at answering this than I am because of your experience in the paranormal investigations, you've done a lot more than I have, is that what is the connection? Is there a connection between, is it energy related? What is do the paranormal and UFO worlds collide?
Right, and this could be an entire show in itself, but people talk a lot about UFOs and aliens as an interdimensional phenomena and not necessarily an interplanetary phenomena, or both, really, but there's an interdimensional element to it. Our science isn't quite there yet. Quantum physics is kind of bearing some of this out, but it seems that sometimes, and I've read about this before, where UFO abductees and people who have these profound experiences with UFOs/aliens will also then start to have paranormal phenomena occur around them. And I think that perhaps what happens maybe is some kind of whatever interdimensional doorway that an alien race may be using, that same doorway might also be the realm of spirit. Mm-hmm. For lack of a better explanation. Can we prove this? Absolutely not. We cannot prove this right now, but it's a theory to talk about. Well, maybe it's a higher frequency or a higher vibration, an energy level, like you had said. But it does seem that there is a correlation, and that there's even a correlation when you go to certain places. If you go to places like the San Luis Valley, we had done, because when we were doing research early on and what documentary we thought we might do, the San Luis Valley was a very appealing place. There's so many UFO sightings there, but there's also a ton of Bigfoot sightings and, leprechaun kind of creature sightings and winged creature Mothman sightings. And when we went to talk to the guy who had done a lot of research in that area, who actually lived there with his wife for many years, he showed us around every home. Oh, that home's haunted. That home's haunted. Every house was haunted. So what does that mean? Is it an interdimensional doorway? Is it because there's a particular vibration in the area? We can't be sure about that.
Right.
I don't want to make a long answer short here, so keep it short. But that's.
But I think it's an interesting thing to kind of try to wrap your arms around and your around and one of the things that we encourage people all the time as we on this journey is that we're not experts.
Right.
I think I would look at you as being a heck of a lot more of an expert than me, because everything that I've learned as a result of working on this film in earnest. And you've been engaged and passionate about, I think, reading and learning, not necessarily going out and doing investigations and field work and stuff like that, but consuming information. And you've pointed me to a lot of things over the years. But one of the things that I would encourage people who are curious about any of this, whether you're a believer, a non-believer, or undecided, is go and do the research. Go on the internet. There's tons of information on the internet. I was blown away by how much is available. Mm-hmm. The primer for me was Project Camelot. Right. I went to that website, and the number of interviews and information that was on there with all the names that you had told me, these are the cases that you should look into, that I'd never heard of before. Bob Lazar, and no clue who he was. But I did some research, and Dan Burrish, never heard of him. Majestic 12, never heard of it. But when I started to do the research and I saw that there was so much information about it, and that there were so many different people that were sharing different stories that corroborate the same information, you start to scratch your head and go, well, wait a second, if I keep digging, I'm going to find more. And we even talked about, if we started there's a couple of different ways to approach a documentary film. And one is a chronological approach. So you start from the beginning and you go kind of, through time. And we chose not to do that. We did an unconventional story, a storytelling device, because we thought the evidence was so compelling that we wanted people to see all of it at one time, as opposed to spread out through, a 90-minute, hour, 45-minute film. So if we did it up front, that there were, especially for people who had never heard of Stan's story before, and our intention from the beginning was to reach the widest audience possible, which meant reaching across the aisle to people who were non-believers with something that could at least pique their interest to the point where they're like, you know what? Maybe I should look into this a little bit more. So, in doing that, we needed to, do the research that allowed us to understand it at the level that would be not too over the top, but again, the whole idea of it being accessible. Kind of lost my train of thought there, so let's move on.
No, that's a good point, one of the things, and I'm going to segue into this, we're going to get to some of the questions you sent, but there's a couple stories that John and I want to share with our viewers and listeners. And I think one of the other things that perhaps happens when you start to go down these rabbit holes and you become more exposed to these things and these experiences, is that more things start to happen to you in your life. And we've both experienced that a little bit with the paranormal, and you become more sensitive to it. You all of a sudden, your psychic abilities are fine-tuned. I know that neither of us consider ourselves psychic by any means, but I think that over the years of doing all this research and work, that you open up to it a little more, and that perhaps you sometimes see things and hear things and feel things that you wouldn't have maybe 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. I think I'll tell a story, and then I want you to tell your story, because I think chronologically that's the way it works out anyway. And I've shared this story with you briefly, and I thought I had told you a long time ago, but I hadn't, because I hadn't told that many people. But when we had gotten involved in Stan's case, we had started getting the phone calls. We had, we were part of this. We were, we went down this rabbit hole full tilt. And about 3 years ago, so it was about 2 years into the project, I was out in New Mexico. That's a place I like to go to a lot, and I had gone out there with my family. So I was out there with my wife and my son. My son at the time was 9 years old, and we had gone out there, and on the way back, we had to connect through Atlanta Airport to get back to Orlando, because that's where we live. So when we got to Atlanta, we had to switch planes, and we had a 2-hour layover. We had a 2-hour sit to wait for the flight. And we were walking through the airport, and we were going down this one particular terminal, and there were gates on either side of us. And we were just walking. I had my backpack. I remember we were just going to go get a bite to eat, relax for a while, and then get to our next gate to get home. I looked over to my right, and I literally, John, in my entire life, I've never done a double take like this. I couldn't believe, I looked over, and there was a girl, a young girl, standing there by this particular gate, and she had the most peculiar look. Her eyes literally were shaped like this. They were huge, they were close together, and they were shaped like this, and they were crystal blue. And I did a double take. I didn't know it at the time. My son did a double take. And I looked over at her, and then there was a guy sitting about 3 feet from her. I looked over at him, and he looked up at me as if to say, he didn't say anything, but he looked at me like, yeah, like, what is this? And literally that's the look he had on his face, like, holy, you know what is this? Mm-hmm. And maybe 10 years ago I wouldn't even noticed, right? But I did. And I, you try to be, you again, it goes through your head, all those things. Maybe it's a birth defect. Maybe she has a condition. Maybe she just looks like this, although I've never in my entire life seen any human being that ever looked like this before. Ever. And I think that, so what happened was, of course, you don't want to make a scene, so we continued to walk. We walked to the restaurant, and after about maybe 20 yards, we got past her. I said, "Oh my God, did you see that?" And my son looked at me and said, "Oh my God, Dad." Actually, it was he who said, "Oh my God, Dad, did you see that?" Mm-hmm. And I said, "Yeah, I did. Oh my God, that was incredible." And he's like, "What?" He's like, "What was that?" And now he had been exposed to some of the phone calls, and he knew he's a bright boy, and he's into this. He's open minded, so he understood the project we were doing. And he goes, "Dad, was that one of the aliens?" Mm-hmm. And literally, I'm like, you know what? I don't know, but John, you and I, we obviously the whole hybrid children thing was a big part of this story. So I was like, I don't know. So I remember we sat down at a Chili's restaurant, the three of us, and I said, you know what, I got to go back. I have to go back, and I have to try to take a picture. I had my cell phone with me, and I'm like, I know this is weird, but order for me. I want a turkey sandwich, whatever, and I'm going to go back, and I'm going to take a picture of this girl. I have to do it because I'm telling you right now, that was not normal. That was something. With everything that's been going on in our lives, in my life for the last 2 years, that's right. Messed up. So I go back to the gate. Now I'm coming from the other way, so the gate that she was standing in would have been to my left. So I get towards the gate. I look over to my left, and she's not there. And this is when it gets really creepy. I look over to my right. She is standing 10 feet in front of me, staring right at me, looking at me as if to say to me, "Can I help you with something?" Like literally, she knew I was coming back. She knew what I was doing. Now, I was all, walking over. I'm like, all right, cool. I got to get a really good photo of her. That caught me so off guard that I fumbled with my phone and didn't know what to do. I panicked and I pretended I was like, I don't know, playing a game on my phone. I was so embarrassed that she was looking right at me. I thought I could kind of sneak around and get a picture of her, and maybe get from the side where she didn't see me. She literally was looking right at me with those eyes and was like,
right.
I know that you know what I am. That's what I got from that. Mm-hmm. So I fumbled with my phone, looked up. She grabbed a bag. Bless you. She grabbed a bag and went beeline for the gate. Walked in, went to the plane. I tried to get a couple pictures. I couldn't. It was too far away at that point. I didn't have a good camera. It was my phone. And that was it. She was gone just like that. And I do remember, oddly enough, that the flight was going to Detroit, of all places. You don't equate Detroit with aliens, but again, I was so shocked by the fact that she was literally waiting for me to come back, and there was some kind of maybe telepathy going on, where she knew that I knew, because I was in that place. We're in that place now. We understand these things, and we're maybe more aware of it. And I have to say, John, that about 2 weeks ago, now this event was 3 years ago, and 2 weeks ago I was in the car with my son, he's 12 years old now, and I said, Nathaniel, remember that time at the airport we saw that girl with the eyes? And he's like, oh yeah, I'll never forget that. I said, describe it to me again, because I want to make sure that we're still on. What did she look like? And he goes, Dad, remember her eyes were really close together, and they were like this, and they were shaped like almonds, but like more up like this, and they were really close together, and it was just, she looked like an alien. She looked like, and I'm like, yeah, that's exactly right. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that you still remembered that as you remembered it. And, John, it's one of those experiences, and you tell people about it. Could it have been a very, very strange-looking girl? Sure. Could have been. I've never seen anyone in my life that looked even remotely like that because of her eyes. And
it was the going back was what was kind of the strange thing.
That's the really weird part, right? That she was looking right deadpan, like just looking right at me. And I think looking back now, if hindsight being 20/20, I think if I wouldn't have been so caught off guard, I would have just telepathically tried to ask her a question. Like maybe it'd been like, it's okay, I know what you are. If you can hear me, just nod your head or something if you can understand that. Of course I didn't. I was so freaked out, by the fact that she was just looking right at me, and
it's not like one of those things that you were looking for happened either.
No.
You weren't like walking around going, either alien looking people here. It's just one of those things that just boom.
Yeah, you're in a busy airport. It's a huge airport, very busy airport. And just that other guy's reaction was interesting too, because the other guy sitting there knew. He also, and it's funny how 99% of the people are oblivious. Maybe not oblivious, but certainly polite. I mean, they're not going to be like, "Ooh, look at that." I mean, they're probably just like, "Oh, she has she was born that way." It's like, with a cleft lip or something, and it's like, this is whatever. It's just the way she was born. But when you know stuff and you've researched things and you've seen things and you've heard things, you're a little more aware of it. So that was one of the stories that was really profound. It changed it. I'll never forget it. But again, and I know you had a really, really interesting story. Wasn't it in your house, right? It was there in Seattle.
Yeah. No, it was shortly after we had met a woman connected to that became friends with Stan, not connected to his story. He had told us all about her, and it was when we were visiting that one time. Doing the research, and he said, this woman who was in the military and had an experience that's just fascinating. You have to hear it. He introduced us to her, and her story was one of those things that jaw-dropping, worthy of potentially doing a documentary film about her story. Just the two of us were riveted by her experience and her sharing her experience. And talked to her a couple of times over that weekend. She was at Stan's house later the next day, and we had a chance to talk with her again. So there was an energy connection, there with her. And I remember talking with you at that, when we were there, saying there's just something. There's a strange connection here with this woman. Not to Stan's story, but just I felt some energy thing going on there, and in a way that I really couldn't explain it. It wasn't, it wasn't like an attraction type of thing. It was more of almost like, a shared energy type of thing for me. And I've had experiences with her before or since then. One time when we were in Arizona, I had a very strange experience with her as well. And that we could probably bring that one up too. That was rather interesting. So that was another one that really did connect me to that. I'll bring that one up next. But the first one was, so after having that connection with her and kind of being tuned into to her energy and her experiences and some of the things that she had been through and was going through at the time we talked to her. She had just gone through this transformation within weeks of us meeting her, where she was out in the desert for 48 hours and had a braided walk-in step into her body. So fascinating story. Again, all new to me. Some of it I was just kind of like, this seems a little bit far out there, but I was intrigued enough to listen and to do some more research afterwards to see that she's not some crazy nut job, because there's dozens, hundreds, thousands of people who have had similar experiences that have been documented. So again, it's out there. But my experience was being, I think, more tuned into that energy as a result of that. My wife and I were reading in bed. It was a Saturday night, and we don't often read in bed and fall asleep reading in bed. It was unusual that would happen. But we both fell asleep with the light on in our bedroom. We always shut our bedroom door. Our two dogs sleep in their beds on the floor. And every night, as soon as we get into bed, they're in their beds. They don't jump up on our bed. They don't wander around. They go right to bed every night, forever and ever. That's what they did. So this particular night, we fell asleep probably around 11:30, 12 o'clock, and around 2:30 in that time frame, Karen and I both woke up at the same time. So it wasn't like someone shaking the other one. We kind of both woke up at the same time and were aware that the lights were still on. But I remember immediately looking over and seeing our one female dog, it's a small little 12-pound Jack Russell, with her butt up against the door and like she was standing guard looking back at us. It was like, Keita, what are you doing? What's the matter? And she didn't move. She didn't. Usually if you call your name and she sees you stir, she'll jump up, kind of run up to you. She just sat at the door. And so we looked for the other dog, and he wasn't in his bed, and he wasn't in the bedroom. So we got up, we called out his name, and he was in our bathroom as a closet. So we have an ensuite bathroom and a closet. And he was in the closet. So it's like, what the heck is going on with the dogs? It just seemed strange. We were kind of like woken up, like that was weird. What the heck is going on? And didn't really think anything of that event, other than it just seemed kind of strange that they were doing that. So we got the dogs back in their beds, shut the lights off, and went to bed. And probably about, I think it was around 3:30, woke up again. Both of us waking up again around the same time, no nudging the other person. We both got up, and it was like, where are the dogs? So neither one of them was in their bed. So again, our bedroom door is closed, so they weren't out of the bedroom. So they had to either be in the bedroom, in the bathroom, or in the closet. So we both got up, and we went looking for them, called out. They didn't come. Usually when you call their name, they come. The two dogs were in the closet, hiding underneath the racks of clothes. So one was on one side, one was on the other, and they were both underneath the racks of clothes, which they have never done. Sometimes when we're in there, they might go in there and kind of lay down in there, but not if we're not in there. That's not something that they would, both of them. Why would they both do that? So I thought that was kind of strange, and Karen was kind of like, she said, do you think something's going on here? Do you think something strange is going on? And I didn't I wasn't going there. And she usually doesn't go there. That's not the first thing that would come to her mind. And she said, do you think there's any, some of that UFO stuff, with this story that you guys are working on? I'm like, no, I don't think so. So we went to bed. Got up the next morning, talked a little bit more about it, and Karen's a very neat person. Everything is tidy and in order. So there's barely dust anywhere in our apartment. So as we were getting up and we were going to go out into the kitchen, she noticed that there was a mark on the wall, right next to our dresser. And when we looked at it, it looked like there was like 3 fingers, like sideways on the wall, or like 3. It was like dust. So they weren't fingerprints. They were like the length of 2 knuckles or 2 segments on your finger, but 3 of them on the wall. And she freaked out. She's like, oh my God, what is this? What do you think this is? And then I went and looked at it and I was like, that's a little weird. So I immediately, I was like, okay, maybe something's going on. I'm not telling her that I'm not reacting that way at all. And I wasn't freaked out about it. I'm like, we weren't abducted. We didn't have scoop marks or, anything on us. But I immediately called this person. And I said, I had something strange happen in my house last night, and I'm wondering if you are picking up on anything. And I really didn't share any details with her. And she kind of laughed, and I was like, what's so funny? And she's like, no, yeah, something definitely happened. And she says, with your dogs, right? And I'm like, I'm getting goosebumps now even thinking about it. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, what was that all about? And she said, they were just protecting you. They were being, good dogs and, making sure they were looking out. I'm like, looking out for what? And she said, well, you were visited last night. And I'm like, again, what? Huh? We were what? And she said, no worries. You weren't, nothing happened. They didn't do anything to you. You weren't, taken. She said, they just observed you. You were just observed. They just kind of stepped in, took a look, and went on. So you hear something like that involved with the story that we're telling, and it makes you go like, okay, really? Possible? Maybe? Yes? I tell my wife this, and she's just like, and she's not hook, line, and sinker. I wouldn't say that she's a non-believer. She is, comes from a religious background, and, she sometimes grapples with the challenges that religion can present to open-minded possibilities. So, but that really rocked her to the point where she was like, I'm pretty sure something happened last night. She was like, I felt it when we woke up the second time. She said, I was curious about it the first time. The second time, she said, I definitely felt something happened. But as soon as I saw that fingerprint, I was convinced that something had happened. And I just, called to, my curiosity was piqued, at that time. So, and the other thing, there was another thing that happened specific with this person again. You and I had been talking about, other things that we could be doing, and I think this was when we were having some challenges with the finalizing the story, with Stan, and some of the agreement language and things were, again, it took us 1.5 years to get to the point where we were in go mode. So this is probably a year into the project at this point. And we were talking about some other story ideas, and it was around the holidays. And I remember, again, I don't know what the catalyst was for it, but we had talked about possibly doing a graphic novel. And we didn't flesh it out. We threw out a couple of things, but it would be really cool to do some sort of graphic novel, with this. And I think it was because of we were talking with Gary down in Arizona about stuff related to that and virtual graphic novels and things like that. So after we had that conversation, kind of planted the seed, like the very next day, I just sat down and wrote a ton of stuff. I wrote like 8 pages of a story outline. And like three, like a trilogy for it. And again, like, where did that come from? So when I was done with kind of reread it again, and like, wow, this stuff isn't in my head. I've never talked about this. Not that it was like, I don't felt like all of a sudden it was just downloaded into my head. I didn't feel like a, lightning bolt. it was like sitting down and just banging away because it was free flowing and it came out. So I called up the same woman that I called with the dog scenario, and I said, this kind of came out of nowhere. Do you mind if I read this to you? And I read it to her over the phone, and she was like, John, that is like so dead on with what's going on. And she said, she said, that didn't come out of nowhere. She said that was given to you to kind of get out of your head. And I said, well, I don't recall anything, I don't recall anything. She said, no, it wasn't a matter of all of a sudden you were jolted and it kind of was there. It wasn't like you had a vision. It just, when you sat down in that moment, you tapped into that recollection of that information, and just boom, it all came out. So that was another one of those, I never had anything like that happen to me before. So these two events happened within like not even 6 months, probably 3 months of each other. That there was kind of like that mind dump of information. So that was kind of crazy stuff. And I mentioned that we were going to mention something else, and I forgot what the other story was.
Well, the triangular craft story.
Yeah.
And then, what's interesting about that is that one of the things that you and I had heard many times is that, large groups of people would see UFOs while around Stan. Mm-hmm. And that excited us a little bit because it's like, good, if we hang out, if we're there a lot and we're hanging out and making this thing, well, hopefully, and it was always a running joke that you had seen some really phenomenal UFO sightings as a kid. And with all of my interest in this, I had never seen anything ever, and nothing that I could confirm and say that was a real UFO. I had seen a couple of strange things at night, but you never know what that could be. So, and I was frustrated by that. But and this happened about almost a little more than a year ago. There was a UFO conference in Sebring, Florida. And Sebring is basically in the middle of the state, in the middle of nowhere. They have a racetrack. They have a race that they're famous for, a car race, and then basically there's a convention center there. That's it. And there was a UFO conference. Stan was speaking at it, and so I live close. I'm in Orlando, so I figured, I'll go to this. And a good friend of mine who had done a lot of, Scott Flagg, who had done a lot of paranormal work with us, is also very interested in UFOs and alien phenomena, and he wanted to go. So I went with him, and also took 2 other friends, and we were going to listen to Stan speak, and there were some other really good speakers there. And we went for the weekend. Well, Friday night, they had it was a little cocktail hour to welcome everyone before the event actually started the next morning. And there were a lot of people there, and Stan was all excited because he had bought it was a night vision camera that he can actually that he could take pictures, still photographs of what he saw through the night vision. So he was excited to try that out. And so it was him and Lisa, me, my friend Scott, and 2 other friends that I brought, this couple that I brought who were very interested in this phenomena. So I took them with me. We went outside and we just walked towards the racetrack, and it was pitch black, which is one good thing about Sebring. There's no light. So it was a very clear night. And so Stan is checking this out, and he's looking in the sky, and I tend to, after about 10 minutes, my neck starts to hurt, and I'm like, I'm done with this. I'm not going to see anything because I haven't for 40 plus years. So what am I, so very frustrating for me. So we're just standing there talking, chit-chatting, and my friend Scott, all of a sudden, is about 10 o'clock at night, and he says, look, there, right there. And I looked up to where he was pointing, and literally gliding, I say gliding because you couldn't hear a sound, right over our heads was a classic triangular shaped UFO with 3 lights on each corner of the triangle, right over our heads. It was the clearest thing. I mean, it was so definitive, and it was amazing. Stan fumbled because he got so excited he forgot to take pictures of it, but he was looking at it. And through the camera he had the night vision, but he didn't take picture because he forgot to. Like you would think of all people he'd be used to it, but he right. He was like, oh my God,
excited, yeah,
exactly. But again, we're at a UFO conference in the middle of the state of Florida, in Sebring, Florida, standing there with Stan Romanek, and a triangular-shaped UFO flies right over our heads. It was the first UFO I've ever seen, had a really clear sighting of. And is that coincidence? I mean, I literally was up all night with Scott talking about what just happened. It was very clear about what it was, so it wasn't a question. We knew what it was. It was an unbelievable, classic triangular-shaped UFO. But was it a coincidence, or was it that we were there with this person, Stan Romanek, who had, reportedly been abducted so many times and was part of these experiments and hybridization projects or whatever was going on? What were the odds of us seeing that go right over our heads, standing out there with him? And I was so excited. I went back inside, and everyone was like, "Oh my gosh!" I couldn't have been more excited about that. Because I'd never seen anything like that before. So again, you're hanging around, you're investigating these things, you're around it, and these things happen to you, and But in the end, John, and I don't know if you would agree with this or not, but it brings up more questions than answers. I mean, yeah, so now I know I saw that, but it's like, why did I see it?
Why did I see it? What was it?
What was it?
Was it government? Was
exactly.
it what is it?
Right.
So that's part of the thing too. I think that we should let people know too that we're not. You're passionate from a learning perspective about this. I can honestly say that this has affected me in the sense that it's opened my eyes to a much broader sense of what is possible. But part of me is that whole idea of there's a faith-based element to it at this point. And when you have enough experiences, you start to put it in its proper context. That I'm seeing things that I either have never been aware of or conscious of, but now I am as a result of what I've been through. So therefore, my mind is open to the possibility of more, but it's also open to being filled with information that can either validate or discredit.
Yeah.
So you're going through this process. Neither one of us are, ooh, we saw this, oh, cool, it exists. Our initial response to everything during this was, well, what was it that just happened? Let's try to strip it to its core, the basics of what it could be. Again, the whole idea, Occam's razor, is probably the most simple explanation of what it could be. But when there's certain things that happen, you're kind of like, okay, what's the simple explanation for stuff that happened with the dogs, with me? I've never had that happen before. These dogs are not puppies. They were, at the time, 8 and 10 years old.
Right.
So you kind of scratch your head a little bit and go, why did that happen? And for you, why did you encounter the woman that you encountered, at the airport? Why did that unfold the way that it did? Why did you go back, to look at it? Well, part of it is because your mind is open to something that it's never thought of before. And the reason why I share that is because I think it's healthy, and it's not skepticism. It's healthy to have a mind where you want to research it. You want to try to understand it for what it was or what it wasn't. And when you kind of do that extra digging, or you open your mind to the possibilities, you start to experience more things like that. One of the comments that's made in the film, Brick Nelson says that, towards the end of the film, this whole idea that people just don't know they don't have a proper context for this type of stuff. So as a result of not having that context, they may walk a line and not witness those other things around them. And, he challenges people to, when you experience something, don't just let it go. Think about it. Do a little bit of research. Ask questions. Learn a little bit more. So there is, part of it, the purpose for making this film from the very beginning was to get that conversation started. So if we made a film that was just for ufology fanatics, we could have banged that thing out in 6 weeks, and been all evidence-based and a couple of commentary back and forth, and they would have loved it. But it just would have fed their belief. They believe already. It just was like more cool stuff for them to see. So we also knew when we made the film that we were probably going to piss off the people who were the hardcore followers of Stan, or the hardcore ufology fans, because they wanted to see more evidence. And we felt that we would be serving Stan's story best, Stan the messenger, by making the film accessible to everybody else, not the people that already were tuned in, dialed in, aware of what was going on. So we've already had a couple of people, and rightfully so, who are hardcore fans of ufology and or Stan say, this is not what I thought it was going to be. And my response to that is, you're right, it's not. But if you read the description of what the film is about, we never said it was going to be that. We made it very clear that it tells an extraordinary story of an ordinary man, and in a way that gets you to connect with them emotionally. So that was the intention all along, for the sole purpose of opening people's eyes so that they may start tuning in to some of the things that you and I have tuned into. We're not preaching that everything that's happened to us is the real deal, but it's happened to us. All we can do is talk about it, and in the course of talking about it, maybe other people will be willing to say, well, I had a situation too. We've had people reach out to us as a result of this journey over the past 5 years to say, you guys are doing something pretty amazing, because you're bringing a story that needs to be told, not just for people who are fence sitters or non-believers, but for people who have had experiences. And that was one thing that I wasn't prepared for in the very beginning of this process was, there's two audiences for this film. People who want to learn more, educate themselves, but it also validates for people who have experienced something, who may not be willing to tell their story because of their connections or who they are, or that it could ruin the reputation of a spouse or family member. So they're not willing to tell their story, but when they see something like this can validate their story. That's one of the things that has been interesting to me, is that as I've seen other stories as a result of what we've been doing, I'm seeing a lot of similarities in these other stories to Stan's case, which makes me scratch my head and go, well, if these people are having the same experience, it's very similar almost to the detail of what happened, how it happened, when it happened, time of day, what they saw, what they felt. When we just even after the film came out and we watched Pete Slattery's documentary, a ton of stuff that is in that is similar to Stan's. And especially when you watch his regression, and that's one of the things one of the questions was, are we going to see anything more? Yes, you are. And one of the things we're going to have is a regression that we shot of Stan's. But when you see Pete move in his regression, he moves the exact same way that Stan does.
Yep.
And that kind of blew my mind when I saw that. I was like, wow, that is very similar experiences for people who were half a world away from each other.
Literally half a world away. Yeah, no, it's amazing. And I think that, again, I think one of the reasons why, and we both shared this vision and thought process, is that this was an important story to tell, and in one way or the other, regardless of who you are, that it was really important for us to finish it, and we had a lot of challenges with this, but it was important to get it done and get it out there. And we're going to talk a little bit. I want you to talk a little bit about the portal, the site, and how people can watch the film. But let's answer. We asked people to send us their questions, and they did. So let's answer some questions for them.
Okay. Well, I've got. We had a handful. I think some of them we probably covered in the conversations, and one of them. So let me go back to that one. Okay, let me go through these. Okay, what is the strangest thing you saw or heard during the making of the film? Specific to the film, I would probably say that the Audrey phone calls were probably the most unusual element of this. Not because it just happened once, but it happened numerous times.
Right.
One of the other questions is, has there been other Audrey calls? or other similar communication since Stan was arrested. And I had a conversation with Lisa a couple months back, and she says, like, where's Audrey when you need her? Audrey has been kind of a guiding, has imparted wisdom and I think created some sort of comfort from time to time for Stan and Lisa with the messages that have been received, but they haven't had an Audrey call in a couple of years, directly to them. I think there's been a couple of other people who have. I think the last one that we were aware of was over a year ago. That brought everybody to that event in March of last year. So the Audrey calls, no, there hasn't been anything, in a while taking, guiding and helping them. Here's a tough one that I don't know if we can answer. I don't know if the science exists for us to delve into this, but it was asked, so we should answer it. If M&Ms had been available, would E.T. had rather eaten them over Reese's Pieces? And I just don't think the scientific knowledge is there. It was a joke, obviously, but I figured I would bring it up because it was asked. But
yeah, I'd go with M&Ms. I don't know if there's anything better than an M&M.
No, I would agree with you on that. Another one, when will more of your Romanek footage become available on altPOV.tv? That's part of what we're working on. In all honesty, we've had some glitches and some tweaks that we've had to make that we weren't anticipating. Obviously, people who were anticipating the launch realized what happened to us, and our editor experience lost time. And if you want to read about that, it's on our blog on the altPOV.tv website, so you can read about that. So we've had some glitches along the way. We want to make the experience, the interactive experience, all the glitches, we want to iron those out before we really ramp it up. So we really have been very quiet in the last 2 weeks because we want to work out all the bugs before we start to promote more and start to put more content on there. But we will. And the number one thing that we want to put out there next in a long form, a feature content, so to speak, is going to be the full regression that we shot with Stan. If people are interested in all the other regressions he had, Stan has those in a book format, the Orion regressions, and I would highly encourage you to take a look at that. It's fascinating, the information that has been shared during those regressions. So that's pretty interesting stuff. Have you considered producing more films with other experiencers? And that's an interesting question because part of me didn't want to do a whole bunch of ufology-related content. There are other stories that we want to tell,
right,
that are non-UFO related. But at the same time, there's a lot of really fascinating things that have not been brought to light in a way that is, again, I will constantly use as a beacon for me that whole human emotion, the emotional connection, because I think we can all relate to people on an emotional level, but we can't relate to them on an experiential level. If somebody has been through an experience that I haven't been through, I can't connect to that experience, but I can connect to their emotion. I can connect to what they're feeling as a result of going through something like that, because I have emotion too. So if we can share stories in an emotional context, I think people will connect to these stories a lot more than they would if it's just, kind of evidence being thrown at people on a regular basis, because your initial reaction is that if I can't comprehend it, it's not real. But if I can connect with someone emotionally who's been through it, I have a much better chance of accepting that they believe that their truth to be the truth. Therefore, if I can accept them accepting their truth, I might not be there myself, I open up my mind to a different process versus, evidence, that picture is fake. But if I see the person that took the photo and how their life has changed as a result of it, I connect with them at a completely different level. So that's really where I've come from on this from the very beginning, is let's tell the stories a little bit differently. We can tell the same story, but twist it in a way where the emotion becomes a part of it, because everyone can connect to emotion. So there are other stories. One of the ones that we've talked about are unexplained pregnancies, and that's a whole other show, and that'll be probably a show down the road. But there are thousands of women all over the world who have become pregnant, and all of a sudden their baby disappears. And some of them are single, and had not had relations with men to have that happen. And one of them that we know is a lesbian and has never been with a man, but was pregnant, became pregnant. And so those are stories that I think are fascinating in the sense because they are all emotional stories. Mm-hmm. You start to talk to the women who've experienced these and share those stories, I think they're pretty fascinating. But we also, J3 Films wants to do unexplained mystery type of things, or putting information in the forefront of people's minds that may be a different perspective on something, and one that we've talked about before. And if I rattle any feathers with this one, that's okay, because that's the intention of telling stories that are off the beaten path or a little bit unconventional. But the whole concept that our country was founded on Christian beliefs is not true. And there's tons of research and evidence out there to validate that. And that's a story that we would love to tell before the next general election, to help people understand that our country was founded on the belief that all men are created equal, and that regardless of your creed, race, creed, and religious beliefs, it wasn't based on we're Christians and this is what it's all about. So that's a story that we want to shed light with. We've done some preliminary research on that, so that's something that's potentially in the works as well. And there's several others. Some of them are more controversial than others. But
my favorite one is, we can't talk about, I don't know, maybe we can, but I have my own personal favorite that I think would be phenomenal. But the answer to the question is yes. I mean, we have a lot of things that we're going to work on and hopefully get to all of it. And we have we're so excited about doing these things, that.
And another important point too is that one of the reasons, people are like, well, why are you charging money for to see the film? Two reasons. One, to pay back the debt that we've incurred, and there are a handful of people who loaned money. We have no investors; they're all loans, and we need to pay them back. So that's one. And two, the concept of behind having the website that can be a delivery vehicle for new content. This helps fund that content.
Right.
Versus every independent filmmaker knows how difficult it is to locate money to make a film. So if we have a vehicle that allows us to fund what's next, we can continue to bring more and more content to an audience and membership. And that's one of the reasons why it's a membership, because we want people to feel that they're part of something that's growing and going to be providing them with more and more content.
Right.
There's another question about when is Stan's trial. It's difficult to find reliable information on the net. I'll go back to that question the discussion that we had earlier, is that we're an independent film company. We're not representatives of Stan.
Right.
We don't engage with them on a daily basis. We're not intending to represent them in any way, shape, or form. So those are things that if there is an opportunity to bring Lisa on and do another hangout like we did on the first day, that might be something that they would be willing to talk about. But I also know they're very hesitant to talk about the legal case with anyone.
They can't. It's difficult.
Not the right place, and that's why Stan really is not accessible at this point. Why did you make the film? I think we've addressed that throughout the course of this conversation. And the last one here is, do you believe that Stan has faked a few of his strange encounters, such as the pen flying across the room in the online interview, or the strange voice that was heard while he was on the radio? I guess my response to that is that those are Stan's stories to tell, Stan's responsibility. Again, go back to that thing, is that we can only have our opinions based on what we experience, and our experiences with them on a day-to-day basis stopped a couple of years ago. So the post-production process was a little bit longer because we needed more funding to finish it. And it was an issue of time, and we needed to have the time in a block to do it. So once we had the block to do it, was when we got it done. But our interaction with them is we're not plugged in on a day-to-day basis, and part of it is because we respect their privacy, and we're not their spokespeople. We're not their press agent. That's not our role with this. I think that we can share information when it's shared with us in the context of it being shareable, but it's not something that we're looking to cultivate. We created a film. We're promoting the film. we're not necessarily promoting Stan's other business affairs. That's just not really where we are. So I think that Stan will address these issues. My personal feeling is that if he did have a reason to do it, if he did them and he had a reason to do them, we need to hear it from him. So,
right.
And I think there are reasons.
And I think, also too, I think that even a lot of the most skeptical researchers that we've come across, they, their take on this is like, there's no question that something happened to Stan. There's so much corroborative evidence in this case, where you're having dozens of people watching a UFO in the sky follow Stan. That hovering above Stan, that dozens of people seeing orbs of light around Stan, seeing, various craft in the sky, dozens of people at a conference walking outside with Stan during a break and seeing UFOs in the sky, hovering around Stan, hovering around the conference. So, the fact is that from a personal, that is to say, even from a personal standpoint, from an objective standpoint, from a logical standpoint, this man had something very profound happen to him. Now, over the course, and it started in 2000, so over the course of 14 years, have some things changed him? Have they made him more paranoid? Have they changed his personality? Are there psychological reasons for doing some of the things that people do when they're going through these very stressful things?
Stanislav had a really interesting take on that. We had a conversation with him.
Yeah.
It was not specifically about some of the things that Stan is going through now. It was much before that, where he said that he used to work in Hollywood and had a lot of clients that were actors. And these are people that were more prominent back in the 60s and 70s. He had mentioned a couple of names that are famous actors that were his clients. And he said that these people, in the acting world in particular, he said there's some similarities between people who have experienced abduction phenomena. And he said in the connection that he made, it's not like that there's some connection to aliens and stuff, but the connection is that from an emotional point of view, as an actor, you're only as good as your last work. You define yourself by what you just completed, and you don't know what's next. I've seen interviews with actors and read things about that before, where their whole thing is like, you never know if you're going to work again. You never know if you're going to get that next movie or that next TV show, and especially as you get older, and especially for women as they get older, the roles kind of disappear. So there's an emotional transformation that they go through. It's like, how do I stay relevant? How do I stay, in the news and important? And he said that there's a lot of people who go through the UFO experience, the abduction experience, who go from having focus on them, whether it is through a doctor's visit or through a regression or through attending an event, whether they're speaking at it or attending it, where they're like kind of thrust into this moment of celebrity is not the right word, but a moment of popularity or focus. Focus is probably they are the center of focus for a given afternoon or day or weekend or time period. And then when that's all over, they're like, what's the purpose? What's my life all about? Type of thing.
Right.
So he said it's not uncommon for UFO abductees or experiencers to go through this process of, what does it all mean? Why am I here? Am I important? So he said that it's not uncommon for them to draw attention to themselves. So I'm not saying that that's what's happening with Stan, but I thought it was a very interesting perspective, is that there are other people in the world who have similar type of experiences emotionally as a result of their chosen path. Mm-hmm. So very interesting insight from somebody who has experienced it both with people in Hollywood as well as people who have had abduction experiences.
Right. And I will say this. People have talked about that particular incident with the pen flying across the room. And again, that's not for us to say anything. But what I will say is that hopefully one day Stan will be able to tell that story in full. because there was a lot more to that story that people just don't know. And again, it's not for you or I to kind of talk about right now, but I think that, again, there's things that you just can't, you until you hear the whole story, then you can maybe make more sense of it. But that's all I'll say about that. But, and again, hopefully that Stan himself will shed some light on that in the future.
There was one more question.
Okay.
That was on our J3 Films page. It's, how has this changed you both in your lives and your belief system, and also your relationship with your family, and how are they handling the changes? And I think we've addressed it to a certain degree. I've addressed it definitely, with my, storytelling that my wife was involved with. But really, for me, I don't think it's been transformational. Really, what it's done is created a desire for more knowledge.
Right.
It's not like, I don't feel that my life has been changed as a result of making this film or knowing Stan in a profound way. But what it's done is it has amplified my desire for knowledge. So my desire for knowledge is talking to people, reading things, going to films, and then not just necessarily about UFOs, but about the whole idea behind altPOV is that there are alternative perspectives that are extremely valid that nobody knows about.
Right.
So why not create an opportunity for those messages to be heard so that people can change the way they think? I think probably the most profound thing that I learned in the film was when Dr. Claude Swanson was talking about the alternative physics that has been studied for the last 90 years. That is not Newtonian or Einstein physics. It is a different perspective on physics that is just as valid, because the research continues to show that there is something there, which is the reason why they continue to do the research, that isn't a widely known concept. And, Claude says that, and a lot of what Stan's equations show is a validation of that alternative physics belief. So, the world was flat once, wasn't it?
Right.
We were an Earth-centric solar system, or not even a solar system, but a planetary system that was proved wrong over time, through science and through belief. So, things constantly change based on the information that's presented. It's up to us as consumers of information to not just, witness something, see something, experience something, and then just let it go. I think it's our challenge to search for more detail in that. I'm going to go back to something that we experienced when we were working in the paranormal stuff years ago. We met with I won't even call her a psychic, because she is one of the most unusual people that I'd ever met at the time, Frances. And for her whole life, she was a nobody, according to her. Her husband was a pharmacist, I believe, and she was his wife, and that was her lot in life until he died. And when he died, she found out that he had nothing saved up. He had nothing. So she says, I'm 55 years old, and there's nothing for me. Now that he's gone, I have no money, there's nothing there. So she had to go out and for the first time in her life, work and find a job, and she didn't know what she wanted to do. Long story short, she works as a bank teller, and as she's touching checks one day, she starts experiencing the lives of the people that she's touching, and she all of a sudden, like a switch is flipped, she's connected to this energy and this ability to, as she would say, through psychometry and touching things, read people's lives and look into the Akashic records and see people, their experiences. And one of the things that she said that I still believe profoundly is that we've gone through so many different stages, and I think this is even discussed in the Celestine Prophecy, that, you know, we went through the Dark Ages, then we went into the Industrial Revolution, and then we moved into the space race and the technology boom that was a result of that, and then into the information age with the access to information. She says, and then your lives become so convenient and everything is so easily accessible, and it's faster, 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 that all of a sudden you get to the point where you're like, enough, let me step back. And she said, this was back in the mid-90s. She said, within the next 15 to 20 years, our focus is going to shift from better, faster to why are we here? And I do feel that there is, you know, based on what's happened over the last 15, 20 years for me, is that, and maybe it's as you get older, you start to shift into that mode as well, is like, what is my purpose? Why am I here? What will my legacy be? What am I going to be thinking about in 5, 10, 15 years? Right. As opposed to when you're 20, you're thinking about what you're going to be doing tomorrow. So, you know, I do feel that there is some sort of a desire for knowledge, because it is so accessible, about what's it all about? Why are we here? Where did we come from? Where are we going? So those are the type of things I think are pretty fascinating at this point. And you know, my assessment of all of it, based on what I've been experienced before, during, and after this, is that we're all of the same. We're all the same. You know, it's of the same DNA, of the same energy. How is this any different? You know, the analogy I'd like to use is that we live on a planet and we're Earth-centric. And on this planet, there are a variety of different races and millions of people. And within that, subspecies and a variety of different animals and insects. And it's hundreds of thousands of classified, and even probably thousands more that haven't been classified. Why can't we believe and extrapolate that to a cosmic universal perspective? Why do we just think like this? When, if we can believe that all of that is happening within this ball, little blue marble, and the speck in the universe, why can't we be one part of something greater?
Right.
That's part of the, you know, the thought process that I'm curious about. And everybody that we talk to moving forward, and everything that we've experienced at this point, kind of has been a catalyst to, okay, what if we're not alone? What if there's more information that's right there in front of our faces? We're just not processing it in the right way.
Right. It's really a journey of discovery, you know, and it's been a heck of a ride, and I'm glad we did it. You know, yeah. I really am, and I'm proud of it. And I know you are too. And I think it's, you know, we told an important story, and, you know, we're just getting the word out now, and you know, but I think that part of it is so important, and it's almost like a legacy. It's like, you know what, we want to make, doing something like this was difficult, but it was worth it. And I think that's how I feel. And I think if I've changed it all, I've always kind of been open-minded, so that was always that was never an issue for me to believe these things. But I think that I was going to say you become less egocentric. You know, you become you start to think more universally, as a universal being, as opposed to an earthbound being, that it's all about us, it's all about me, it's all about what I do, it's all about that. And so many of us, I think, on this planet right now are so caught up in our own crap that we fail to see out and look out to the wonders of the universe and what's out there, and that when you get involved in projects like this and you have these experiences, that you can't help but change you, you know. And I think that I'm glad for it, though. I'm very glad for it.
Well, I think both of us going into this, we were open-minded. We felt that we were on a journey for information anyway. Right. So it wasn't. There was no, you know, 2x4 to the side of the head, I think, for either one of us. In some ways, there was some validation of things that we were already exposed to, pondering. But, you know, having the ability to spend time with somebody who has experienced something that we can't even begin to comprehend, you know, is pretty pretty profound. I think a lot of people would love to have traded places with us just to have the experience to sit down and have conversations with Stan. But my immediate response to that would be is, you know what? He's no different than you.
Right.
You know, he is an ordinary guy.
Right.
Extraordinary circumstances, which is why the film is the title that it is. Why
Right.
extra is in red and ordinary is in white, because he's an ordinary guy experiencing extraordinary circumstances.
Right.
So, and you know, there is this kind of desire to, you know, touch the hem of Stan's, clothes, because there is that sense of aura around him. And I'm not trying to belittle it, but what I want people to understand is that you could be Stan. You know, somebody out there could, he's no different than you when it comes to, as Lisa says in the film, he puts his pants on one leg at a time, just like everybody else. He's not an anomaly when it comes to, his interaction with people. He's an anomaly if, his story takes him back to my lab scenarios and, his genetics are something we can't comprehend. That's a whole nother story.
Right.
And that could be a future film for us or somebody else. But, maybe this film will help be the catalyst for awareness that will allow other films and other filmmakers to explore some things that may not have been easy to. And we'd love to have that, experience happen on altPOV.tv. And just to wrap up, I think the one thing that I would want to express is that altPOV.tv is a community, and our vision for what that could be is pulling people together who have access to and a desire to show what they have experienced, whether it is their own personal films that they've captured, whether you're a filmmaker who's created an alternative film that you can't find a home somewhere else. It can be here. I mean, we have over 500 members on a site that launched 2 weeks ago, and we've done nothing in the last 10 days to really promote it because we want to get all of the bugs ironed out. When we promote it, we expect to have, before long, 1,000 and 10,000, 50,000, 100,000, 500,000, a million people on this site. When we can build that type of community where people are coming to because they're hungry for this type of information, we need the content to deliver to that audience. So the plea right now is to any other filmmakers that are out there that are looking for a place to show their story or the project that they've worked as hard as we know what goes into being an independent filmmaker. The end result is that you want people to see it and appreciate it for what it is. And if we can become a portal for that type of sharing, that's exciting to us. We'd like to have a film festival down the road. We'd like to be a distributor of films down the road for people. We'd love to be producing other people's films by helping them, fund their projects. So if this website truly is going to be realized, we need the help of other people and their messages. We cannot fill an entire network, and I truly believe this is a media network, with just the content we've shot so far. We'd have to do a lot more, and we just don't have the time to do it, to fill a site like that. So we're going to need other people to be a part of it. And so we'll put it out there. Who's out there that has a story that they want to tell, not necessarily that we're telling or we're filming. If you've got a film and we can take a look at it, we may be happy to have it live on altPOV.tv.
And also, so people can get a hold of the documentary by going to altPOV.tv, and they can get it a couple of ways, correct?
Yeah, it's available as a purchase as a DVD. Oh, wow, man, something really weird just happened on the screen.
What happened?
I don't know if you can hear your sound on my end just got a little strange, but your eyes just. Nothing else on the screen had artifacts, but your eyes just popped out, popped on the screen.
Really?
I'll be interested to see if that was in the recording or not, or is it just on my end.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because the sound just went crazy for a little while for me, and now it's fine again. and I don't know if you were hearing that, but I'm very curious to see if that showed up on there. That was quite bizarre.
I'll play it back.
So the two things are, there's the DVD available, and there is also a video on demand. So the video on demand is a 48-hour rental for $5.99. You can watch it as many times as you want in that 48-hour period. And the DVD is obviously a DVD. It's in English language right now. We hope to have it in other languages down the road, but right now it's available in English. No subtitles are available yet. Maybe down the road it'll be either subtitled or dubbed in other languages. So there's two options right now, for the film, as a DVD or a video on demand.
Okay. And, well, Jon, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate that. And we've been wanting to do this for a while. You and I have talked about this, sharing some stories that pretty compelling stuff. So, again, thank you. This was very informative. Also, you just to tell our viewers and listeners that you can this show will be downloaded on Friday, May 30th, is it?
Yes.
I'm sorry, yeah. And at 8 p.m. Eastern, it will be available on altPOV.tv. Go to the radio, and you'll be able to both watch the podcast and listen to it as an MP3. So again, Jon, thanks for coming on tonight, and we're going to do this again soon, and what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of the paranormal experiences that we've had and get more into the ghost and spirit stuff that we've experienced.
A lot to tell there too.
A lot to tell there, and that'll be fun as well. So again, thanks, Jon, and we will have you on again soon.
Great, thanks a lot, Jack.
All right, thank you, everyone. All right, bye-bye.